Mr. Lizard and AlbysFeat. AlbysFeat, AlbysFeat, Mr. Lizard and AlbysFeat.
"Go ahead, Alby. Ask," said Bobby. Alby turned to his parents. "Mom, Dad, may I please take Mr. Lizard to school for this month's show and tell contest? The teacher picked 5 students, and I'm one of them. No one has ever brought in anything live before, so I just might win. I'm a little worried, though. Mrs. Hinckley told us that we can't use the internet to do our research." His mother smiled and said, "I think Mrs. Hinckley has given you a wonderful challenge, Alby. Don't you?" Dad nodded in agreement. "When your mom and I were in school, there was no internet, so we had to be creative in our research. Just try to think of people who you could talk to and places where you could find information." Alby hung his head and nodded. "Remember, Alby," his mother encouraged, "although the internet has a wealth of information, sometimes that information is false or unfounded. Doing research the old-fashioned way allows you to check and double-check your facts. Just let me know if you hit a roadblock, okay? My prediction is that Mr. Lizard is going to be the star of the show." Alby remembered the day last year when they went to the pet store. When he entered, he immediately noticed a large cage. Pointing and shouting in delight, he yelled, "Lizards!" and everyone chuckled. Alby wondered what all the laughter was about. He was uncomfortably shy and embarrassed. He ran to the next aisle and crouched down as if he were looking at other reptiles. His mother followed. She knelt beside him and said, "They're called lizards, Alby, not lizards." Alby approached the cage and watched with amazement at how active the little creatures were. As one lizard moseyed towards him, Alby said, "Mom, Dad, I like this one." The manager of the shop explained that this was not just any lizard. "This is a chameleon," he said. "Chameleons are unique because they can change colors with their mood or to blend in with their surroundings for protection." Since Alby had allergies and needed to give up his kitten, a fur-free chameleon seemed ideal. His parents bought the chameleon and a book about reptiles, along with a supply of mealworms to feed the new pet. When they were leaving the store, his mother asked, "What are you going to name him?" "His name will be Mr. Lizard," Alby proudly stated. "I thought you might say that," she laughed. Alby's new responsibility was to care for his pet. He read his chameleon book over and over, and he learned how to feed, water, and show affection to Mr. Lizard. The chameleon lived in a cage in Alby's bedroom. The cage contained 2 large branches, a heat rock, and 2 seashells. Mr. Lizard liked to soak up the warmth from the heat rock or from Alby's arm when they were together. Alby, his 3 sisters, and Bobby worked together to build an outdoor corral that Mr. Lizard could visit on warm summer days. They used assorted sticks and stones to construct and fortify the outside, and lined the inside with colored pebbles and pretty flowers. The chameleon adapted nicely to his summer resort. While the children played, Mr. Lizard lounged comfortably in the sun and in their companionship. Mr. Lizard's diet included a variety of bugs, which Alby and Bobby hunted in the backyard. Ants and spiders were easy to catch, but crickets, grasshoppers, and flies were more difficult. The boys looked forward to capturing whatever happened to be buzzing, hopping, or crawling around. Then, they enjoyed watching Mr. Lizard devour the critters. Sometimes, when they went outside, Alby left the bedroom window open in the hopes that a fly or 2 would buzz in. If there were flies in the bedroom when the boys returned, one of them would shut the door while the other rushed to close the window. The boys stalked their prey until they caught it. Then, one of them opened the cage door and the other tossed in the fly. Mr. Lizard stayed perfectly still. Only his color changed. When the fly was close enough, he shot out his lightning-fast tongue and snatched it. Chomp, chomp, gulp. The boys dropped leftover fruit and vegetables into the cage. Mr. Lizard enjoyed them and, according to Alby's mom, he also helped to prevent wasting food. Each week, Alby cleaned Mr. Lizard's cage. He began by transferring his pet to a large plastic bowl, where his sisters watched the chameleon closely. Occasionally, the girls entertained themselves by allowing Mr. Lizard to scurry around the kitchen floor. Suddenly, when the little chameleon found himself surrounded by giant shoes instead of his branches, rocks, and shells, he darted about to avoid the forest of feet. While the girls amused themselves, Alby continued to work. He washed all of the items from the cage with soap and water to remove all the dust, dirt, and droppings. Then, he dried everything and returned them, along with Mr. Lazard, to a spotless cage. Alby's parents complimented him on an excellent job, and that made him feel good. Alby was excited about the upcoming show and tell contest, and spent most of his spare time researching chameleons. When Alby's grandparents visited on Tuesday, they were a wealth of information. They had traveled extensively over the past several years, and had learned a great deal about people, places, and things. They had also learned a lot about chameleons, because they had spent time in tropical places. Traveling is like going to school, Grandmother explained. You meet many interesting people and learn from them. Alby added to his notes much of what his grandparents told him. While arranging his information into storytelling form, he turned to say hello to Mr. Lazard. He noticed that his pet's water was low and needed to be refilled. As he added more water, his mother called to remind him to feed Mr. Lazard. Alby ran to the kitchen to fetch some mealworms, and he forgot to close the cage door. What a mistake that turned out to be. Mr. Lazard escaped. Alby and the rest of the family spent the afternoon searching and searching, but they couldn't find the chameleon. Alby phoned Bobby and explained what happened. Bobby filled a bag with 4 flashlights, several dead bugs, and some dental floss and rushed to Alby's house. "I have an idea," Bobby shouted. The boys handed flashlights to Alby's sisters. Each girl searched a room. Alby and Bobby worked together, tying lengths of dental floss to dead bugs that Bobby had gathered from the windowsills at home. They hoped that they could lure Mr. Lazard from hiding. Mom and Dad assisted them in the search, combing the dining room and living room. Plants and pictures were their main focus, especially pictures of plants. Alby's parents stressed that everyone should be careful while walking around and moving things. Mr. Lazard's ability to change color meant that he might be right underfoot and easily stepped on by someone not paying attention. After a while, a shout came from one of the girls' bedrooms. "I found him!" exclaimed Joelle. When she slid the computer over, there were only a few dust balls. "I thought I heard him crawling around. I guess I was wrong," Joelle admitted. The search went on. Alby and Bobby pulled their dead bugs along and around all the furniture, but they were unsuccessful at finding Mr. Lazard. Sadly, it was late and time for bed. Alby did not look forward to the long night, a night without Mr. Lazard that lay ahead. Good morning, children. It's 7:05. Let's get dressed, eat breakfast, and head for school, Alby's mother said. Alby slowly buttoned his shirt and forced his shoes on without untying them. "Be careful while putting on your shoes. Mr. Lazard may be inside," he heard his mother warn. Alby was dragging himself along and entered the dining room at last. He hadn't slept well because he had spent a lot of time worrying about and looking for his pet. Sulking, he asked, "Mom, may I please be excused? I'm not hungry." "Don't give up hope," his mother told him and gave him a big hug. Insisting that he eat something, she placed a bowl of cereal and an apple in front of him. As Alby poured the milk into his cereal, he asked if his mother would keep looking for his pet after breakfast. But before she could answer, there was a sudden splash. Mr. Lazard jumped from Alby's shoulder right into his bowl of cereal. Alby was relieved. I guess Mr. Lazard was really hungry. Everyone laughed. As usual, Alby and Bobby met in front of the school. As they climbed the stairs, Alby told him the story of finding his pet. Bobby patted him on the back. "What a relief," he said. "But you can't waste any more time. Mr. Lazard's disappearance slowed you down. You'll have to work extra hard to prepare for show and tell." "I know," said Alby. The two entered the classroom, put away their lunch boxes, and sat quietly. Mrs. Hinckley got up and turned off the lights to conserve energy because the day was bright and sunny. "Excuse me, class," she interrupted. "May I have your attention, please? There is a slight change in plans. The bookmobile has come today instead of Thursday. This is a stroke of luck for those of you who will take part in the show and tell contest on Friday. You can borrow books on your topics from our library on wheels." She instructed the students to line up. They marched outside and into the bookmobile. Bobby turned to Alby. "What an awesome day you're having. I'll pick out a book and then I'll help you carry the ones you need." Alby checked out several books with information about chameleons. This was one of the many things that filled the school day with excitement. When Alby got home, he hurried to check on his pet. He had become more cautious after Mr. Lazard's disappearance. "Hi, Mr. Lazard. Are you ready for show and tell on Friday?" he asked. The chameleon's head bobbed up and down. Alby thought at first that Mr. Lazard's behavior was amusing. Then he thought, "That's weird. Mr. Lazard can't be agreeing with me. He can't understand me." Mr. Lazard's head continued moving up and down. His neck expanded in and out. He started changing colors from green to brown, blue to black, and back again to green. Alby began to get nervous. "You started doing this a week ago," he realized, "and I wish I knew why." He remembered an exhibit that he had seen at the Children's Museum when he was younger. There was a movie that showed reptiles behaving similarly to Mr. Lazard. He hoped someone at the museum would know more about chameleons. Alby rushed for the telephone and called the Children's Museum. He was asked to hold for the reptile curator. "Mom, come quickly." "What's a curator?" he asked. "A curator is a person who is an expert on a subject," his mother explained. "Hello," a voice said. "This is Mrs. Johnson, the reptile curator. May I help you?" "Yes, ma'am. My name is Alby, and my chameleon is behaving oddly. First, he bobs his head up and down, and then his throat expands. This is called a dewlap or throat fan," Mrs. Johnson explained. "This occurs when a chameleon defends an area by scaring off another chameleon. Also, a male's brightly colored throat fan can attract a female chameleon." "But Mrs. Johnson, my chameleon is the only one in the cage," Alby added. This made Mrs. Johnson wonder. Even she could not understand why the chameleon would do this without another chameleon present. Alby and Mrs. Johnson exchanged puzzled sighs. "Is it possible that your chameleon can see his reflection in his bowl of water?" Mrs. Johnson asked. "No, the bowl is really small," replied Alby. He assumed that Mrs. Johnson could offer nothing more, but just as he was about to say goodbye, he mumbled, "Reflection?" "Pardon me," said the curator. "That's it! A reflection! I put a mirror in his cage last week." "Absolutely," Mrs. Johnson replied. "Go remove the mirror. I'll wait." Once Alby removed the mirror, the strange behavior stopped. He returned to the phone. "Thanks for your help, Mrs. Johnson. Goodbye." What a relief, he sighed to his mother. His mother reminded him, "Remember, if you ever have a question, don't hesitate to ask somebody. Usually, people love to help solve problems." A few minutes later, Alby asked his mother, "Do you think Mr. Lazard is related to dinosaurs?" "That's a good question, but I'm not sure," she said. "I think that they are," added Alby, "but I'd like to be sure. May Bobby and I ride our bikes to the library and see if we can find out?" "Yes," she said. "That's fine as long as he wants to go and it's okay with his mother." Alby called his friend. Bobby got permission from his mother and pedaled over. As the boys were leaving, Alby's mother called out, "Be careful and make sure you're home for supper. Your sisters and I are going to help you with your show and tell rehearsal tonight." Upon entering the library, Alby asked the librarian, "Are chameleons related to dinosaurs?" "I believe they are. We have a large selection of reading material with many explanations and illustrations. These are resources for doing research, and we call them reference materials," she instructed. Alby and Bobby sat on the floor and looked at dinosaur books. Alby confirmed the fact that chameleons are indeed related to dinosaurs. He decided to include information about dinosaurs in his presentation. "That will capture everyone's attention," he exclaimed. His friend agreed. "What a great idea!" Alby used his library card to take out a stack of books on this subject. Bobby reminded him that he would only have 10 minutes to present his show and tell project. The two boys rode home quickly. That evening, Alby's family helped him rehearse. He placed Mr. Lazard on the console and displayed pictures and diagrams around the cage. When he started to recite, his voice cracked. He was nervous. His sisters, Vicky, Cheryl, and Joelle, were eager listeners. Vicky teased, "Alby, you're changing colors just like Mr. Lazard does." "That's enough," warned their father. Vicky apologizes. "Alby, you have to be ready to handle all kinds of questions and comments from your audience," Cheryl reminded. "Good point," Alby agreed. "And many living things turn colors," he added with a smile. He spoke about different types of chameleons and their habitats. Then he explained how the creatures possess one of the best camouflage techniques in the animal kingdom. On the day before show and tell, Alby reviewed all of the material when he got home from school. He was determined to make the presentation fascinating and educational. Before practicing his speech, he placed Mr. Lazard's cage on the dresser. His pet looked at him and turned as green as a field of grass. Alby recalled learning that the greener a chameleon gets, the happier it is. That made Alby happy too. As he walked away, Mr. Lazard's bright color faded. He felt that Mr. Lazard truly loved him. He decided to add this to the end of his presentation. At last, his show and tell was complete. Alby got up early. It was the day of show and tell. Knowing that the winner would compete in the statewide science fair really motivated him. He scooted down the hallway to scoop up the cage containing his beloved pet. "Are you ready, Mr. Lazard?" he asked. "Sure am," came a reply. Alby jumped in surprise. As he turned around, he discovered Bobby had snuck in through the back door. Both boys chuckled. Then they loaded the box into Alby's father's station wagon. They packed everything they would need: the cage, food, water, the mirror, and index cards. "Let's go!" his father yelled as he ran down the driveway to meet them. During the ride to school, Alby began to feel edgy. His father suggested that he just sit back and take a deep breath. "Maybe I should go first, so I can get it over with," sighed Alby. Bobby disagreed and encouraged him to watch some of the other students first to see how well they did in their presentations. Alby liked that idea. The competition was certainly going to be tough, and not being the first to go might reduce some of the pressure he felt. When they arrived at school, Bobby got out of the car while Alby took another deep breath. His father handed him an index card from his jacket pocket. It read, "Make plenty of eye contact with your audience. Be pleasant. Keep your sense of humor. Have patience. Listen to all comments. Respond quickly and thoroughly to all comments. Most of all, have fun." Alby thanked his father, grabbed his boxing cage, and shut the car door. His father honked the horn and waved as he drove away to work. "Are you ready?" Bobby asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," Alby said. Inside the classroom, Mrs. Hinckley instructed the 5 participants to arrange their desks in a circle. She asked if they knew in what order they wanted to go. No one could seem to agree. Finally, Alby piped up. "I'll go last." A few students giggled. Matt volunteered to go first with his presentation on conserving energy in hopes of creating a healthier environment. Others decided how they would follow. They all wished each other good luck. Alby's confidence grew during the presentations. In between speakers, he reviewed his notes. When Michael, the 4th student, was finishing, Alby's heart began to beat faster. After Michael answered the last question from the class, he removed his volcanic material from the desk.
Fact sheet. Did you know? No.
Number 1. There are more than 160 different species of chameleons in the world. Number 2. The anole is the specific name for the chameleon mentioned in the Mr. Lazard and AlbysFeat book. Number 3. Chameleons flick their tongues in the air to capture scent particles. Number 4. At night, when a chameleon goes to sleep, their tail will often curl up into a perfect spiral. Number 5. The color of a chameleon depends on their mood, humidity, temperature, and health. Number 6. A chameleon can live up to 7 years. Number 7. A chameleon's eyes move independently, allowing it to see 2 different views at once. Number 8. The male anole chameleon is 5 to 8 inches long, while the female anole is generally 1 to 2 inches shorter. Number 9. Male anole chameleons have a throat fan or dewlap. Number 10. Female anole chameleons can lay a single egg every 2 weeks. I guess it's time, Alby whispered to Bobby. The two boys walked to the front of the room and arranged everything for the presentation. Bobby returned to his desk, and Mrs. Hinckley motioned for Alby to begin. He started by inviting the students to come up to the desk slowly and to briefly examine his display. After the last student had looked at Mr. Lazard and taken his seat, Alby began to explain the basics of a chameleon's life. He spoke about its habitat, its size, and its prey. He also spoke about its senses and defense mechanisms. The minutes passed quickly. Alby described chameleons as cold-blooded and requiring warm temperatures. He told the students that the creature's overlapping scales resemble shingles on a roof and act as tiny solar panels to intensify the sun's heat. Someone shouted, "Like a fish!" "Yes, you're exactly right," said Alby. "Do you know of any other living things with scales?" A hand shot up. "A snake?" hissed Justin, the class clown. Everybody laughed. "Correct," said Alby, smiling. He explained that chameleons and snakes are similar because of their scales. Both of them belong to the reptile family. He stressed the importance of their need for warm climates, and added that half of all species of chameleons live in Africa, where people often use them for food. "Yuck," groaned Kayla. "Their skins are sometimes made into coats, shoes, and purses, too," Alby added. He announced that the next part of his presentation involved hands-on participation, and he requested 3 volunteers. Although he expected the girls to be squeamish, 2 of them appeared at his side. "Would each of you, one at a time, please touch Mr. Lazard and tell me what you think?" urged Alby. Sierra went first. She leaned forward and exclaimed, "Wow, he does feel like a snake." "More like a fish, but just not as slimy," offered Sophia. Justin nodded. "He feels like my mom's pocketbook, but he looks like a prehistoric creature I saw in a movie." "Some experts think that chameleons and other reptiles are direct descendants of the dinosaurs," Alby added. Much to the delight of the class, Alby continued sharing more facts about chameleons. He walked around with his pet perched on his forearm, and everyone seemed comfortable with Mr. Lazard's presence. They were inquisitive and eager to learn more. Next, Alby prepared his audience to witness an amazing phenomenon of nature. He asked all of the students to gather around him. "Mr. Lazard will now show you his throat fan." He removed the mirror from his pocket and placed it in the cage. The students moved even closer for a better view. Alby was about to explain that the reflection would fool Mr. Lazard into believing that there was another chameleon in his cage. He stopped himself, though, and sure enough, as the chameleon stared into the mirror, its throat expanded.
Julie exclaimed,
"I wonder if he thinks he sees another chameleon in the cage." Alby was so glad that he had let the students figure out Mr. Lazard's behavior on their own. They were learning, just as he had, about the unique ways of a chameleon. "And now Mr. Lazard will demonstrate his beautiful colors," Alby boasted. The students wondered how the chameleon would do that. "Watch carefully as I take 5 steps back," said Alby. Mr. Lazard's color faded. When Alby walked closer to him again, his pet's color returned to green. The students were so amazed that no one said a word. Alby was thrilled that the presentation had gone so well. The audience clapped loudly. Some students even whistled. When Mrs. Hinckley winked at Alby, he knew he was on his way to the big science fair.
AlbysFeat, Mr. Lazard and AlbysFeat, AlbysFeat.